I had, scabs all over my face from being up for days and days on meth and having psychosis and picking at myself. I was completely unrecognizable and different.
Perfect. I can see the sweat coming down your face. I can see the whole thing. Just
Yeah,
post
that's
workout
right.
rush right now.
Oh
So
yeah.
where are you at now? Where are you located?
Right now I'm up in Northern California.
Okay.
Yeah.
What gym do you go to up there?
I go to a YMCA up here, man. It's really cool. I've gone to like Golds before. I've done the Planet Fitness thing when I'm on the road. Done all that. But this place is great because they've got like a saltwater pool. They've got all kinds of different like weight training stuff, cardio stuff, and they also got a sauna, which is a big one for me.
Oh man, how long do you spend there every day?
I try to do minimum 10 minutes. Some days I'll get up to like 20 minutes. Some
Mm.
days, like if I'm really, really pushing it, or if I go in without getting much of a workout before, I feel like I can go longer sometimes. I'll do like 25. But if my core temperature is already up, and I start sweating like immediately, then it's like usually 10, 15 minutes.
I don't do really well in saunas, but I got a sauna blanket here at home that
Oh, really?
it goes up to about 180.
Oh, dang.
So it roughs me up to here so I can sleep in it for like 45 minutes and be okay with it. But sitting in
Yeah.
a sauna, I couldn't go more than 8, 9 minutes without I got to get out of here. Crazy.
Oh, yeah. I've never tried one of those, man.
Yeah, it's different. It's nice to have around when you really need it. But I'm in Scottsdale, so it's already 110 degrees outside. So
Yeah, you could just step
I
right
walk
outside
outside
here.
and do it. Yeah. So
Exactly.
what was your workout today like, Rose?
Today, today I was already a little bit sore, so I did kind of, and I had some things to do, so I didn't do like as in depth. But I've been trying for like shoulders and back. One thing that I do kind of every day, that I do like upper body stuff or dips,
Mhm.
just because I feel like they're kind of like a good functional thing that I can kind of incorporate into like all those days. And I've been doing dips. I would do 4 sets of 16, dips. And I did that for so long that I got to the point where it's so easy. And my brother was like, man, you should throw some weight on that. Like, if you're doing those that easy, you're not going to be gaining anything. And so I've been doing that. I've been throwing like a 25 on, and just doing as many dips as I can. Usually I'll start with like 2 sets of 16 and then it'll, barely be able to do like, 8 or 10 by the end of that. But just trying to kind of increase the weight as that goes and get more weight on the dips. I did that, did some lateral raises, some military press. And then I like to do I don't know what you call these, but they're basically for lower back, that little contraption that you lay on and
Oh,
then
hyperextensions.
hyper extensions.
Yeah.
Those, man, I did 4 sets of those. Um, so a pretty good one today, but it was kind of just you know not as in depth.
Do you do a lot of body weight stuff like dips, pull ups, and all that? Is that something that's really
I do, yeah. It's kind of been out of necessity, because on the road, a lot of the times we won't have like a access to a good gym all the time, so it'll be just hotel room stuff, and I'll end up doing push ups or I've even had like lawn chairs, or chairs to do dips on. Like I've done that before. Um, just kind of making use of whatever we have. So it's kind of become a habit. I like doing the body weight stuff because it you can do it anywhere and it kind of is a good like functionality thing. I feel like I'm able to just move around the stage a little better. I just feel more limber.
do you take anything with you on the road? Like bands, TRX, anything like that that you
No, I just
what?
well, yeah, I have a couple kettlebells that I take, and I'll use those from time to time. Again, like if I don't have access to a gym or something like that, I'll just do those in the parking lot of the venue a lot of the time. That's pretty much it, that. And then I'll bring some yoga mats and stuff. I like to stretch, quite a bit, especially before going on stage. That's a big one. I like to be, stretched and whatnot.
What are you training for right now? You training like an athlete? You want to be like an athlete? You're just trying to be a performer, a musician? How?
Just training for longevity, man. That's really it. To be a performer, and As a kid, I grew up, and my dad was always doing something active. He was really into mountain biking, or hiking, or, he'd go to a local a gym that, and he'd do weight training or take us to the track, we'd go run. He always had us doing something, whether it was, that skateboarding, snowboarding, we were doing something active. Um, and so he's still doing that stuff, and he's coming up on 60 soon, and I want to be like that. I want to be able to go into my 60s, 70s, hopefully 80s, making music, being able to be out there. And I've kind of seen what happens too, to people in my family and other people I've known who live more of like a sedentary lifestyle.
Right.
And I've lived that lifestyle before. I've been in the van just sitting there for 8 hours a day, rotting away, and it really makes me feel terrible, physically. And so when I started taking like the fitness stuff seriously, over the past few years and just making it a part of my everyday routine, I'm not trying to be Dave Draper or something, like I want to be like, able to continue doing this into my older years, and just makes me feel great.
Before I ask you, like before living in or not living in a van, but sitting around in a van for 8, 9 hours a day, how do you
Yeah.
feel? Like, how do you feel now? Like when you're on stage, how is all the working out, staying in shape? How does that make you feel like come showtime?
Um, you know, it's funny when I first started it out, we were traveling so much. I had this idea in my mind that I was like, oh, if I get up early and I exert myself and I work out, maybe it'll make me too tired to, like get up on stage and give it my all. Maybe, if I go too overboard. And I didn't realize like that, it basically made my energy levels like skyrocket, and I had way more energy even with getting up early, getting a good workout in, or doing some cardio or something to kind of get my blood going.
Mhm.
My energy levels went up. That's it's definitely been a huge improvement, on my performing ability, and just like the day to day. It's hard, being when you are on the road and stuff. Like I'd mention that a lot, being on the road, because I think that's the biggest reason for me um, to try to keep that. So easy to lose it out there when you're just there's all this bad food that you could potentially eat, all this just kind of bar food or venue food, and you're sitting a lot and all that stuff. So if you're not actively counteracting that, it's like you're gonna wither away,
Wh- what are like I guess the pitfalls of travel or being on the road? Like how tempting is it to just I guess sleep it in today or wait sleep in that's the right phrase.
Yeah,
How is it sleep in or just maybe do it the next day or do something light or do nothing at all and just wait till you come back home and start fresh.
it's extremely easy. It's because the routine a lot of the times, that we would be doing would we'd be playing, Wednesday through Sunday a lot of the times, and have a couple days off, and every night we'd be playing a new place. Some days we drive 4 hours, some days 5 hours, some days 8 hours,
Mm.
and so it was easy to basically get into the thing when you're going to bed every night at 3 a.m. That's when you're back at the hotel and you're ready to finally go to sleep. Sometimes you don't fall asleep till 3, 4 in the morning, and then you got to get up to drive at 8, for van call. Um, you're sleep deprived. You don't want to eat healthy. You don't want to go do that stuff. But I realized like when I started forcing myself to and just making it a priority, um, it kind of offset the effects of like the sleep deprivation. It felt like, and I was able to kind of hang with that a little bit more. And I also just started prioritizing like instead of going out with everybody and hanging, for hours doing nothing after the show, I'd be like, all right, guys, I'm going to bed. And, they'd, everybody else would be like yawning and exhausted in the morning. And I'd be like bright eyed and bushy tailed, So I kind of like realized how just those little adjustments helped, just with the day to day. And that's kind of what's kept me going with it.
How hard is it to perform on say 3 or 4 hours sleep?
It can be hard, but I think there's this weird thing for me that happens where you almost get kind of like into this weird sleep deprivation. Um, it's almost like survival mode where you just have to keep going, and you're just living on caffeine and just pushing forward. So it's I definitely have gotten used to it over the years. We do it a lot different now. Now we have like we've made a point to get more rest and to do it. But when we were like sleeping in the van, this is years ago, back doing it that way, it was very, very different.
Like, can you give me like a day in the life or back then? Like, what would?
Oh, well, when I first started touring out or touring, out west, doing like runs for California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, um, it would be me, Jody, my fiance, she's also in my band. We would just get in the van with our band and we'd go and, play a show in Tahoe, and then we'd drive to Portland, Oregon, to go play a show. And sometimes we'd drive through the night, sometimes we'd sleep at a Walmart parking lot, get a hotel if we could afford it, and we'd all sleep in one room, people sleeping on the floor, or we'd like, sleep in people's houses that we'd met. It was very like very punk rock back in those days, the way that we did it. And then, as we kind of developed more of a professional attitude and, things started kind of taking off, we, obviously got on the program of, what you're supposed to do as far as like getting hotel rooms and getting rest and doing all that. But back then, yeah, it was very much just kind of, eat what you can, sleep where you can, and do what you can.
What were some of the meals like? What were some of?
Back then, man, it was like, whatever the venue had, a lot of like chicken fried steaks and, stuff like that. You know, Nowadays it's like, it's so different, the way that I like to do it. I hit a lot of grocery stores. Um, that's a big one for me is, I'll go to a store and I'll stock up on a few things to kind of get me through a few days just so that, when we are driving or, or flying, I'm not like, uh, you know, tempted to just eat garbage. You know what I mean? I try to eat mostly like high protein, you know, low, fairly low like processed carbohydrate stuff. Try to keep it like as whole food as possible.
I mean, do you have any? I guess your go-tos that you like pack with you, or you just automatically jump at the grocery store?
Yeah, definitely. I love the chomps, beef sticks. I like those a lot. Um, those are a go-to for me. I really like I think they're called RX bars.
Oh yeah.
You seen those? They're like, they've got like egg whites, dates, and
Mm.
nuts in them. They're like very simple ingredients. That's pretty much what I try to go for now is like stuff with super simple ingredients. I found these energy drinks that I'll drink sometimes, and Jody, my fiance, makes fun of me because they're like kind of these little girly drinks. They're like pink and yellow cans, but they have like, no artificial sweeteners, super, all natural ingredients and green tea caffeine. They're called Gorgie. And
Okay.
I like those drinks, so if I need something to get me through, I'll pound one of those and it's, I don't have to feel too bad about it.
Now looking back, do you look back at the old days, like driving the van, sleeping on the floor, and say, "God, those were fun times. I miss those." Or are you like now, like, "Thank God that's over. We moved on from there."
Sort of both, I'd say both for sure. It was I look back fondly, those were some really good times. Like, and we had so many kind of bonding moments as a band, when you're in that close quarters with people and you're going through the crazy stuff that you see at truck stops and at places you're staying and at clubs. It's like it really brings a group of people together, and it still does that. When we go out on the road, even though it's like, we do it as like a professional touring business where it's like, we play actual venues and we sleep in hotels and stuff. uh it's still like the camaraderie is huge and it's still there. So for sure I look back fondly, but I don't miss the sleep deprivation aspect of it.
Do you look back from those days playing, going from city to city, and now seeing yourself going to Australia, I guess at the end of this year, playing in Europe? Are you like, wow, you never saw this one coming, or do you always have it in the back of your mind that yeah, we're gonna be world famous, we're gonna be touring the world one day?
I always kind of had it in my mind that that's what I wanted, and that's what I've, been really like working toward has been really, to get my music out there to as many people as, can hear it. And doing it, for the love of the songs and the love of the music and the performance and all that. Um, but yeah, Australia is definitely one that I wouldn't have expected, to happen um, like it did. It really came together. We got hooked up with a good promoter out there who does a lot of rodeos, and so we're gonna go play a whole bunch of rodeos and clubs out there. And there's a market, that the people love my music out there. Europe, there's a lot of fans in Europe as well, which is one thing I never would have really guessed. I've been to Europe one time before, and it blew my mind how many people were fired up on American music. And so
You're like the third person, I think the third singer now that's going to Australia. Is that like a hotbed now for country music or?
I think it is, man. I think it is. Like I just saw, seen a bunch of people going there recently, and I know that they've had their own types of country music. They've got like I think it's Lee Kernigan is his name. He's like a country star from Australia. They've got some history with it for sure. But you know how the United States, I think, is kind of experiencing like a renaissance right now with country music, where it's like coming back into popularity, and it's back into like the public like consciousness right now. Everybody's thinking about it. Everybody's doing a country album now,
Mhm.
and I think it's like it's happening in Australia as well. And so, they're hungry for it, which is a good thing. I
No.
just want to go see some koalas and eat some good food and maybe go to the beach in Australia. That'd be pretty cool.
You were from, if I read right, that's up Northern California, like Bakersfield, like down
Yeah, I
by
grew
Stanford.
yeah, I grew up in Santa Cruz area, Santa Cruz County, a little town called Ben Lomond, California.
Okay. Is that
Hmm.
so? Would you do like that? That's right by, if I read it right, Redwood Basin, and
Yeah, 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 Big Basin and all that. Yeah,
did you do like a lot of hiking back then, or a lot of
definitely. Yeah, we grew up, hiking, and I grew up like in that whole area, the San Lorenzo Valley where I grew up. It's as densely wooded as Appalachia or any other part of the country that you'd consider, a dense, mountain forest. Like it really is, and it's small mountain towns and mountain people, and um, so I grew up like yeah, up there, and I would go to high school. We would do our PE runs on the Fall River Trail, or I'm sorry, Fall Creek Trail. Um, which was this beautiful run back up in the redwoods, and there was a lot of that for sure.
Mhm. Did you do? Oh, what was I going to say? How do you get your 10,000 steps in now?
Now, I've been doing this walk close to where I live. There's like a good river walk that's like it's like a good, I think just over 6 mile. And I think that ends up being like 12,000 steps or something like that. That's a good one, that I'll do. That takes me, if I'm taking my time and just kind of cruising along about an hour, um, that's a good walk that if I can get that in. And if I don't have that to do, if I'm like out on the road, I'll try to just go walk around, the clubs, walk around the cities, or hit the treadmill in the gym or the place that I'm staying if they got one.
Now, did you just use that time to reflect? Did you just like think, meditate at the same time? Could you write a song at the same time while you're walking, or?
Yeah, like a lot of ideas and song ideas and lyrics and things have come to me like out on, especially in like nature walks. When I've been outside, that's kind of a big uh, inspiration for me is just the outdoors in general. So that's a place I like to go to think for sure.
Hmm. So, by the way, I was listening to Son of San Lorenzo all morning now. I had a continuous loop.
Oh, nice.
Probably a big fat Crankster is my number one song right now. So
Oh, nice,
that,
man. Hell
that
yeah.
one, and what was the other one? Son of the SR22 that I saw on YouTube this morning.
Oh,
Oh, to
SR22.
the
Yeah,
SR22.
you like that one? Hell yeah.
That one too. I almost remember the words to it, but
Yeah, yeah, that's a
yeah.
fun one.
But this was, I said, Crankster was great. I said, the whole album was really, really great. How'd you get, I guess, traditional country up in California?
Well, there's a huge history of country music from California. There's Merle Haggard, he's probably the greatest country singer of all time. Like in many people's minds, in mine, he's my favorite. He's from California. He's from Oildale. And Buck Owens and the Bakersfield Sound, that kind of laid the groundwork um, for country music, you know, really for the twang, like all of the twang that you hear in Nashville, as far as like Alan Jackson and all those guitar tones, you know, that's all based off of California guitar. That's all based off of Bakersfield stuff. That's where those guys from the South learned that stuff was from guys like, you know, Roy Nichols and Don Rich, who were playing those songs, and they were from California. And so I think nowadays, like there's just this weird kind of stigma with people don't associate California with, you know, country music or whatever, but it has a huge history of it and it's got so many country people. I mean, California is the leading agricultural state in the United States. You know, we produce more more produce and nuts than any other state. So there's like a huge market for it, is my point. You know, there's a lot of country people here, a lot of country music fans, and as well as like, you know, rock, you know, country rock, like, you know, classic rock, like a lot of those bands of the 60s and 70s came out of California also. So I think there's this big crossover that I grew up on like these bands that were um, mixing country and rock and roll, like the Eagles, you know, Flying Burrito Brothers, Creedence Clearwater Revival, bands like that that kind of walked the line between country and rock and roll. And I think that's kind of woven into like the fabric of California, and that's what I'm trying to, you know, bring back to the forefront of people's minds, you know.
Is it hard to stay within that genre of country? I mean, do you ever try to or feel tempted to cross over into, I guess, new, wondering, was it neo tradition or something? What new
Neo
or
traditional.
bro country? That's the word.
Oh yeah, bro country. No, I mean, no hate to those guys. They're just doing their thing that they enjoy, and you know, for me, that's not really kind of music that I'm called to make. But yeah, I like traditional, you know, just traditional country music and you know, country rock and folk and bluegrass and all kinds of stuff like that. You know, that's kind of more where uh my interest has always been, and that's just naturally what has always kind of come out.
How'd you start out in punk then? If I was a mistake, if I read that correctly or listened to it correctly, you were in a
Yeah,
punk band at first?
yeah. I was in a punk band and some rock and roll bands and played, you know, in a lot of different bands growing up. Yeah, I was a drummer first, so I played drums from the time I was, you know, 9 or 10 years old, and I played in a lot of local bands. You know, when I was growing up, you know, I'm 32, so when I was growing up, like, you know, punk rock was kind of like having this resurgence, you know, in the mainstream almost, you know, with bands like, you know, Green Day, you know, bands like that were kind of coming into popularity. So I remember as a kid, like getting turned on to that stuff and then digging deeper into like the 80s punk and hardcore stuff. You know, bands like Black Flag and stuff like that. And, you know, bands that were also from California. And so I got really influenced by that. And, you know, it was just around. It was part of that, the culture at that time, like in the late 90s and early 2000s in this area at least. And so I just got into playing with those bands and
Yeah.
playing that music. Yeah, I got into playing that music, you know, just basically from being around it. You know, that was what a lot of the other kids I went to school with were into, and I got influenced um and I loved it. You know, it was a really good way to it was an energetic, kind of aggressive form of music that was a lot of fun to play drums to. And and then I started playing drums in my dad's band. He played in like a classic rock band and they played some country stuff too. And when his drummer couldn't make it, you know, I got to be proficient enough on the drums that I could sit in, you know, with him and with their band and fill in for him. And so I kind of started doing that, and that was like my first real introduction to playing like, you know, country beats and country music, and you know, rock and roll music, more straightforward classic rock stuff. And so, you know, a lot of the older people that I knew at that time, they were into country. You know, when I was in high school, I remember Alan Jackson came out with, what was it, Country Boy, I think had just come out, that song. And like that was huge at my high school. You know, everybody liked that. So country music's always been around. It's kind of just, you know, country, punk rock, rock and roll, alternative, whatever. It's just been like, there's just a lot of music out here, I guess, you know, a lot of like different music uh, influences, you know.
Can you mix all the genres at one point into your music? Like, can there be a little bit of punk into some of your songs out today?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Especially like my first album. If you listen to that one, the one with SR22 on it,
Hmm.
that's the self-titled record I put out in 2018. That record has a lot of those kind of like, grittier guitar tones and like faster drums, and like it's definitely more, in the punk rock and rock and roll, country rock realm. Because that's like what I was just coming out of, was like, that era. And so yeah, there's certain stuff, that definitely leans more into that for sure.
But who do you listen to in your headphones when you're working out?
Oh man, headphones, I really like to listen to I like to listen. Lately I've been listening to Creedence a lot, Creedence Clearwater Revival. I like them a lot. I love Led Zeppelin. That's great workout music for me. Um, I like listening to like high energy country stuff like Alan Jackson, stuff like that. Hank Jr. I really like. I love Merle Haggard, Waylon Jennings. Those kind of classics, kind of back and forth between country and rock and roll. That's pretty much what I listen to.
You're the first person or first singer that I've asked. I listen to country music and work while working out.
Oh, really?
Usually it's always like 90s progressive, like Breaking Benjamin or
Oh,
Slipknot,
yeah.
type like that. But yeah,
Yeah, sure, sure, yeah. I like country, to work out too, but usually it's mostly like, country rock stuff. I like it to have a little bit of an edge and some energy. I don't want to listen to slow, sad songs while I'm trying to get my pump on.
I did want to ask one question. I read part of the bio that Bobby sent me over. It was part of, I guess, like overcoming addiction.
Yeah.
I did want to ask about that, like from like when did that occur, and like what was like your breaking point that made you say, okay, enough is enough. Today's the day I'm
Yeah.
start the rest of them with my, I guess, regaining my health for better lack of a better way.
Yeah, yeah, totally, man. Well, that the addiction, kind of started out. I started drinking, excessively, and smoking weed and partying and stuff when I was really young. I was probably 11 or 12, when I started doing that stuff. And then, as I got a little older, like into high school and whatnot, um, that just progressed. It just got to be drinking every day, and then drinking all day every day, and then it was smoking weed and drinking all day and taking pills. And then, it's kind of one thing led to another, to where, I would get introduced to another drug or something. Um, and where it ended up was, when I was about 17, 18, I started using, heroin, and I got hooked on that. I started using methamphetamine, got hooked on that also, and would do those together. And that was like my, uh, kind of my downfall, like I did that for, a number of years, until, getting clean and sober. But it took me a long time to kind of like, you know, I'd be on it for a year, and then I'd try to get sober for a couple months, and then I'd go back to it, back and forth. I was in and out of like jail and rehab a lot, and, you know, pulled some geographic, moves, tried to move away, go someplace else, and then it would kind of catch up to me there. I was just running from myself. And so basically, I met Jody, my fiance, and I was, at that time, I was holding a job. I was kind of, trying to play music on the weekends when I could. I really wanted to play music full time, but I was drinking and I was partying and doing coke and amphetamines and stuff like that, whatever I could get my hands on. But my one rule was like, okay, I'm not going to go back to the super hard, drugs like heroin. Uh, but then slowly but surely, I kind of like slipped back into that path. And basically, Jody, found out that I was on these drugs. She confronted me about it, and I had met her, and I was like, this is the first time in my life that I had ever met, a woman that I truly, truly cared for and loved in that way. And she basically was like, if you want to change your life and you want to, grow up and stay with me, like you have that choice. But if not, like I can't stick around for this. So I kind of had a fork in the road, and and I chose to kick it cold turkey and just kind of suffer through it. And that was 8 years ago.
At any point during that time, or even before that, were you ever into working out or training or just staying in shape, or did you have any?
Yeah, before then, like throughout high school here and there, I would do that. There's a weight bench in our garage. I would do that with my brother here and there. My brother's always been really athletic and into fitness and stuff, and so he and I would work out from time to time. But it's been more so a part of my recovery, that I've kind of gotten into, since getting clean and sober. It's been like, first I put down the drugs and I started eating better and then I started exercising. It's been kind of this chain reaction of like self betterment.
Like, how far do you think you've progressed? Like, how bad were you, like health wise, to the point until up to now? Like, how
Oh,
drastic?
like back then?
Yeah.
Oh, back then, man, I'm, for instance, like right now, I'm, 6'1". I'm probably like 175. I got down to like 110 pounds,
Oh,
like
wow.
skin and bones, just like emaciated, drug addict. You know, I had to go to the hospital for abscesses from, shooting up drugs with needles and shit. Yeah, I had, scabs all over my face from being up for days and days on meth and having psychosis and picking at myself. I was completely unrecognizable, a different person, 100%.
And
And so, go ahead.
were you performing at the time or any type of
No, no. Well, I was playing in some punk rock bands. Yeah, I was. And they all eventually fired me because like we would have a show booked and and then I'd be in jail, and the show would have to be canceled because I wouldn't be around.
now with all that, like I said, all that history, all that past, good or bad? I mean,
Yeah.
does that make you a better songwriter? Do you have like better stories that you can just, bring out through song and music?
I think it from personally, yeah, I think like it makes me a better songwriter than if I wouldn't have gone through that stuff. I think that, it's a very like unique perspective that I have, and I don't think that a lot of people, um, at least in the country music realm today, have been through like the lifestyle that I have, or seen those things. Some have, and some people, have that to draw from. But I think it is a fairly unique perspective, for sure.
Is there one song that comes to mind that you'd be like, "There's no way I would have ever written this if I didn't go through what I went"?
Yeah, yeah. There's a song of mine called "Gray" that I wrote. That's all about addiction, and that one was like, firsthand experience for sure.
Through? Yeah. Could you have done this without Jody?
Oh, like gotten clean and sober, pursued music.
And just yeah, and continue on the path that you're on right now.
I would bet not. Probably not. I think that she, in a lot of ways, kind of helped to save my life. Because I needed somebody to believe in me, and I needed some reason to get it together for long enough to get out of that life. And she offered me that. She was kind of like this hand up from the darkness. As far as you know love and light and positivity and whatnot. And so I don't think it. I Who knows? You never know. I could have figured it out, but I don't think that it would have gone the way it did without her for sure.
The one question, I have one last question on that
Oh
part.
yeah.
What's the I guess the defining moment that you were able to, I guess, to go from, like for better, rock bottom to get a break, to start singing again, now to play locally, and now just to continue this onto a very successful career. Like, how's that? What's that first step in getting that whole ball rolling?
Oh man, the first step was just to the very first step was to just put it down, is to put down the drugs and make the decision to, not use them, not do them for that day. And then since then it's been just one baby step, one foot in front of the other, just it's like you can't eat an elephant, all at once. You got to do it one bite at a time type of thing. I just really have spent these past years building. And Jody and I, we started out screen printing t-shirts, in our garage, in our living room. And you know all of my records. There were times where we were so broke. I was sober, but we were so broke that I was selling my CDs and records, so that we could get food or we could have firewood to keep us warm in the winter. Like there's a lot of really tough times, but like I didn't give up on the sobriety, and I think that is what has led to whatever success I have now, because if I wouldn't have done that and I would have continued, using or drinking, I probably wouldn't be alive. But if I was, I definitely don't think I would have, the life that I've built today for sure.
What do you do now with all the extra, I guess, the free time, all the extra time that you've gained from no more hangovers, no
Oh
more
man,
late nights, stuff like that?
I love to be active. I like to go outside. I love to fish. I like to hunt and fish and do stuff like that. I love going on runs or walks. I love going to the gym, spending time with family. It's nice, because I get to go get up early in the morning and I don't feel bad. I'm not beholden. I don't have to go buy drugs to feel normal. Like there's nothing, that is holding me back from living life, on life's terms, and living it, the way that it's meant to be lived.
Do you fish and hunt regularly or?
Yeah, yeah, pretty regularly whenever I can. It hasn't been something I've been able to do recently just because we've been so busy. But whenever I get a chance, I try to.
Like, what is your what do you usually hunt for or hunt or fish for most? What's your,
For fishing, I love. I really think bass fishing is a lot of fun just because it's catch and release. If I was like to fish for food, I like trout fishing, or ocean fishing for like I've gotten to catch tuna or dorado. That's a lot of fun, and good eating fish. For hunting, I like waterfowl hunting a lot. Ducks and also birds like doves. And you know, I'm always kind of learning. I want to get into deer hunting just because that's some of the best protein that you can possibly get. It's super healthy and there's a connection to the food and whatnot.
you cook your own meals or do you cook your own what you hunt and kill?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do. I
What's your
do.
special? Like, what is your specialty? Like, if you're having a barbecue at your place, what's the
Man, barbecue. I do love, even if it's not something that I've, killed. I love making burgers. Like that's a good thing. I love a good steak. Um, for duck, I really like let's see, what have I done with the duck? I've slow cooked it before and I've done tacos before. I've just, kind of broiled the breasts before. I've cooked whole duck before. That was pretty good. For doves, I like to do jalapeno dove poppers. Those are pretty delicious. Fish, you can't go wrong with fish tacos. That's one of my favorite things to make.
have right now? It's like just for your world tour coming up. Do you have to
Yeah.
prepare for this? You have to prepare, like I said, physically to get ready to go on overseas? Or?
Yeah, yeah, a little bit. That's kind of why just every day, I try to stick to my program and my routine and make sure that I'm, in good shape, to be traveling. Because I know that it's going to be harder to make that happen in Europe. I've learned in Europe they don't have gyms everywhere like the U.S. So it's kind of like, you have to do those push-ups and dips where you can and go for runs and stuff like that. And so it's like the more I kind of take care of myself now when I'm home, the easier it is on the road when it's harder to.
Do you create your own program, or do you have like a trainer, or do you follow something on Instagram, or?
I follow a lot of people. I don't have a trainer or anything, but I made my own program just kind of based on like other guys that I'd seen. There's some dudes that I follow. Um, a lot of different guys, and I'll kind of just experiment with whatever feels, best for me. If there's something that I get into for a while, I'll do that, and then I'll change it up.